the CEO of a massive tech company, took her twin sons on a blind date with a black man. She pretended to be broke, but everything changed when he stood up for her. "I'm sorry, but you can't come in here with those children," the restaurant hostess said, looking at the woman in faded jeans holding two 5-year-old boys. "This is a fine establishment, not a playground." Sarah Kingston never imagined she would be barred from entering a restaurant she had frequented for years. Of course, now without her designer suit and private driver, she was just another single mother trying to take her sons out to dinner. "I have a reservation," she replied calmly, adjusting Ben on her left hip while Leo held her free hand. "Table for 3, under the name Kingston." The woman frowned, clearly annoyed. "Ma'am, I need you to understand that our customers expect a proper environment. Perhaps you'd be better off looking for a more family-friendly place." Sarah smiled in a way that made the receptionist feel inexplicably uncomfortable. It was the kind of smile powerful people used when they knew something you didn't. "Can you check the reservation, please?" That's when he appeared. Derek Thompson walked across the parking lot, checking the address on his cell phone for the 3rd time. A 32-year-old criminal lawyer, he had reluctantly agreed to this blind date, pressured by his best friend, who insisted he needed to get out more. With 2 kids, he had asked when he received the profile photo. "Seriously, Michelle, a broke single mom is exactly what I need in my life right now." But there he was, watching a white woman being clearly discriminated against at the entrance of one of the most expensive restaurants in town. And something inside him boiled over. "Excuse me," Derek said, approaching with steady steps. "Is there a problem here?" The hostess turned quickly, assessing the elegant suit and confident posture of the newcomer. "Oh, you must be her date. I was explaining that it would be better to find a more appropriate place for children." "Appropriate?" Derek raised an eyebrow. "You mean a place where families feel welcome, regardless of their appearance?" The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah watched, fascinated, as this man she barely knew decided to fight a battle that wasn't even hers. "I didn't say that," the receptionist stammered. "You didn't have to," Derek replied, taking his cell phone out of his pocket. "You know I'm a lawyer, right? And that establishments like this can lose their license for discrimination." It was at that moment that Sarah realized something extraordinary. Derek wasn't defending a billionaire in disguise. He was defending a single mother with 2 sons, period. He didn't know about her fortune, her company, anything. And yet, he had chosen to stand by her. "You know what?" Sarah said, picking up the boys. "My date is right. Let's find a place where we're actually welcome." Derek looked at her, surprised by the calmness in her voice. There was something in those eyes he couldn't quite place. It was as if she was seeing the whole situation from a completely different perspective. "Do you know a good place for kids?" he asked, smiling in a way that made her heart skip a beat. "I know the perfect place," Derek replied, "and you can be sure we'll be treated like people there." As they walked across the parking lot, Sarah watched Derek chatting animatedly with Ben and Leo, who had already fallen in love with a lawyer who had defended their mom. What Derek didn't know was that he had just passed the most important test of her life. And what Sarah didn't realize was that this man was about to turn her world upside down in a way that all the money in the world couldn't buy. The local diner was the complete opposite of the previous restaurant. Formica tables, plastic menus, and the smell of hamburgers in the air. Derek watched Sarah help the boys up onto the high chairs, noticing how she made a point of wiping down each surface before they sat down. "Sorry about that," she said, avoiding his gaze. "Not exactly what you expected for a first date." "Actually," Derek smiled, "I prefer it this way. At least here people won't judge us by the color of our skin or what we're wearing." Sarah stopped cleaning the table and looked directly at him. There was something in those eyes she couldn't quite figure out, as if he were constantly evaluating, measuring reactions. "Does this happen a lot?" Sarah asked softly. "More than you can imagine," Derek replied, but his voice carried a weight that went beyond simple resignation. "Ben, Leo, what do you want to eat?" While the boys debated between nuggets and French fries, Sarah watched Derek more closely. Her jeans were simple, But the watch on her wrist, which she quickly covered with her sleeve, seemed too expensive for someone who was broke. Something didn't add up. "What do you do?" she asked, pretending to be casual. Derek hesitated for a split second. "Consulting? Nothing too interesting. And you?" "My friend said you're a lawyer, criminal. I mainly defend cases of racial discrimination and social injustice." Derek noticed how her eyes lit up with genuine interest. "I believe that everyone deserves a chance to defend themselves, no matter who they are." "Even when they have money?" Sarah asked, as if testing something. "Especially when they have money," Derek replied without hesitation. "Rich people can be victims too. Prejudice doesn't choose based on bank accounts." That's when Ben spilled juice on Derek's shirt. While Sarah quickly got up to ask for napkins, Derek simply laughed and started cleaning the boy up. "Don't worry, Mom," said Leo, holding Derek's hand. "The lawyer man won't leave like the others." The silence that followed was revealing. Sarah returned with the napkins, but Derek had already noticed the pain that crossed her face. "The others?" he asked gently. Sarah sighed, sitting down again. "It's hard to find someone who will take the whole package. Single mom, 2 sons, complicated life. Most disappear when they realize it's not just fun and games." "What about their father?" "He died 3 years ago," she said, her voice growing quieter. "A car accident. I've been doing everything on my own since then." Derek felt his chest tighten. He looked at the boys who were now drawing on napkins and understood why Sarah always seemed on guard. She wasn't just protecting herself. She was protecting the hearts of 2 children who had already lost so much. "It must be hard to trust people," he said. "You have no idea." Sarah looked out the window. "Some people only get close when they think you have something to offer. Others disappear when they find out that real life is more complicated than an app profile." "And how do you tell the difference?" Sarah smiled in a way that made Derek feel like he was being tested. "By watching how they react when things get tough. When a kid spills juice, when a waiter is rude, when someone like that receptionist shows her true colors." "And I passed the test?" Derek raised an eyebrow. "You're still taking it," Sarah replied. But there was something warm in her voice. Their conversation was interrupted when Sarah's cell phone rang. She glanced at the screen and frowned. "Sorry, I have to take this. It's work." Derek watched as she walked away to talk, noticing how her posture changed completely from relaxed mom to something more authoritative. Her words were sharp, decisive. "No, cancel the meeting with Johnson and Associates. Yes, I said cancel. I don't care what they think." When she returned, Derek pretended he hadn't heard anything, but his lawyer's mind was processing information. Johnson and Associates was one of the largest corporate law firms in the city. What kind of consultant canceled meetings with them like that so casually? "Everything okay?" he asked. "Just a few clients who think they can buy my time anytime," Sarah replied, putting her phone away. Derek nodded. But something wasn't adding up. The woman in front of him talked about financial difficulties, but she canceled meetings with multi-billion-dollar companies as if it were her choice. She wore simple clothes, but there was a confidence in her movements that only came with real power. "Sarah," he said slowly, "can I ask you a strange question?" She tensed slightly. "Of course. You're testing me, aren't you?" The smile she gave him was answer enough. It was neither denial nor confirmation, but the acknowledgement that he had noticed something that other people hadn't. Everyone tests everyone, Derek. The question is, what kind of person are you when you think no one important is watching? He laughed, shaking his head. "You're interesting, Sarah Kingston. Much more complex than you let on." "And you?" she replied, watching him cut Leo's food without being asked. "Are exactly who you seem to be. And that's rarer than you know." At that moment, as Derek helped 2 boys he barely knew and talked to a woman who clearly had secrets, he had no idea he was about to discover that his definitions of rich and poor, power, and vulnerability were completely wrong. Every new humiliation Sarah had faced over the years only strengthened something inside her that her oppressors couldn't see. A quiet determination to find genuine people in a world full of masks. and Derek was about to discover that he had passed the most important test of his life. 3 weeks had passed since that first meeting, and Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in years: genuine hope. Derek had agreed to see her again, and more importantly, he had begun to become a natural part of the boys' lives without forcing anything. But Sarah still hadn't revealed who she really was, and for a very specific reason. "Mommy, why don't you tell Mr. Derek about your real job?" Ben asked as she helped him with his homework in the modest apartment she had rented specifically to keep up the charade. "Because first, I need to make sure he likes us the way we are now, Prince," Sarah replied carefully, storing her real documents in a hidden safe. What Derek didn't know was that every one of their dates was being meticulously documented, not out of obsession, but out of necessity. Sarah had learned the hard way that people could change dramatically when they found out about her fortune. Her late husband, Adam, had been betrayed by his own brother who tried to manipulate his will while he was in the hospital. Friends of decades had disappeared or become self-serving, and 3 subsequent ex-boyfriends had tried to use the boys as a bridge to her money. So Sarah had developed a system: discreetly record public encounters, document genuine reactions, and maintain a false persona long enough to get to know a person's true character. It was her way of protecting herself. But with Derek, something was different, and it both thrilled and terrified her. "Sarah, are you okay?" Derek asked, noticing her distraction as they walked through the park with the boys. "You seem preoccupied." "Just thinking about work," she lied, watching as he automatically caught Leo's hand when the little boy stumbled. "Do you want to talk about it? Sometimes it helps to talk." Sarah almost laughed at the irony. How could she explain that she was planning a complete overhaul of her company's corporate structure to implement stricter anti-discrimination policies inspired directly by the conversations they had had? "Actually," she said, stopping walking, "there's something I want to show you." She pulled out her phone and showed him a photo of the restaurant where they had been discriminated against. "Remember that place?" "How could I forget?" Derek frowned. "Why?" "They were sued yesterday for racial discrimination. It seems that several people filed formal complaints after a security video was leaked showing how they treated a white family at the entrance." Derek looked at her, surprised. "Really? How did you find out?" Sarah hesitated. The truth was that she had been responsible for initiating the entire investigation, using her legal contacts to review the establishment's practices. But she couldn't tell him that yet. "A lawyer friend told me," she said, which was technically true. "Apparently they're going to have to pay a hefty fine and provide mandatory training for all employees." "That's good," Derek said. But Sarah noticed something in his expression. "Sarah, can I ask you a direct question?" She tensed. "Sure." "You have more money than you say you do, don't you?" Sarah's heart stopped. "Why do you ask?" "Because you have the confidence of someone who has never really worried about money. Because you canceled a meeting with Johnson & Associates as if you were the one calling the shots. And because—" he smiled sadly. "No broke consultant gets inside information about legal proceedings that quickly." Sarah looked at the boys who were chasing butterflies a few yards ahead. It was the moment of truth, but something inside her still resisted. "What if I did?" she asked carefully. "Would it change anything?" "Honestly," Derek replied, and Sarah's heart sank, "it would change things because it would mean you've been lying to me for weeks. And lying is the one thing I can't forgive." Just then, Sarah's cell phone rang. It was Michael Hayes, her legal director and best friend since college, the only person who knew about her social experiment with Derek. "Sorry, I have to take this," Sarah said, stepping away. "Sarah, we have a problem," Michael said without preamble. "Someone found out about your meetings with the lawyer. They have photos, and they know you didn't tell him who you are." "Who?" "Your sister-in-law, Veronica. She's threatening to leak everything to the press. She says you're disrespecting Adam's memory and that the boys deserve proper protection from opportunists." Sarah closed her eyes. Veronica, Adam's younger sister, had become a toxic presence in her life since her husband's death. She believed that the boys should be raised by her in an appropriate environment, and that Sarah was incapable of making the right decisions about her own life. "She wants a meeting tomorrow at the office with you and your boyfriend," Michael continued. "She said if you don't show up, she'll go public with a story that the inconsolable widowed billionaire is cheating on an innocent man." Sarah glanced at Derek, who was watching the boys with a genuine smile. He had no idea of the storm that was about to break over them. "Michael, I need you to prepare some documents for me. It's time to show Veronica that she's picked the wrong person to threaten. What are you planning?" "She wants a meeting. She'll get one, but it won't be what she expects." Sarah hung up and returned to Derek, who was now helping Ben draw on the ground with colored chalk. "Is everything okay?" he asked, noticing her serious expression. "Derek," Sarah said, kneeling beside him, "tomorrow you're going to find out some things about me that could change everything between us. And before that happens, I need you to know that every moment we've spent together has been real. Every conversation, every laugh from the boys, every time you stood up for me, all of it has been the most genuine thing that's happened in my life in years." He looked her in the eyes, seeing something there that made him swallow hard. "Sarah, you're scaring me. Just promise me one thing. When you find out who I really am, remember who I was here with you and the boys. Because that woman, the clumsy mother, the lady who spills sauce on her shirt, the one who needs your strength to face the world, that's the real me." At that moment, as Derek held her hand without fully understanding what was happening, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. Not just about revealing her identity, but about how she would deal with people like Veronica forever. For years, she had allowed others to control the narrative of her life. Tomorrow, that would end, and Derek would discover that the woman he was falling in love with had far more power to protect him than he could ever imagine. The next morning, Derek stood in front of one of the most imposing buildings in the city. The Kingston Corporate Center was 40 stories of glass and steel, with a company name engraved in gold letters at the main entrance. "Are you sure this is the place?" he asked the doorman, showing him the address Sarah had sent her. 38th Executive Suite, the man replied, pressing the elevator button. "Mister, you're on Miss Kingston's guest list." Derek's stomach churned. Miss Kingston? The company had Sarah's last name, but that didn't mean, did it? The elevator doors opened into a luxurious reception area. Ben and Leo were sitting in leather armchairs, drawing in expensive coloring books. When they saw Derek, they ran to hug him. "Mr. Derek, Mommy said you were coming to see our special office today," Leo shouted, holding his hand. "Special office?" Derek asked. But before he could process the answer, a woman in her 40s approached with firm steps. "You must be the famous boyfriend," Veronica Sterling said with a venomous smile. "I'm Veronica, Sarah's sister-in-law, sister of the late Adam." Derek felt the hostility immediately. "Nice to meet you." "Oh, I'm sure you are," Veronica laughed coldly, "especially considering you have no idea who you're really dating." That was when the double mahogany door swung open. Sarah appeared, but this time there was nothing modest about her appearance. Impeccable suit, authoritative posture, and behind her, two people who were clearly lawyers carrying briefcases. "Derek," Sarah said, her voice echoing differently in that environment. "Thank you for coming." "Sarah, what's going on?" Derek looked around, finally connecting the dots. "This is your office?" "Actually," said Veronica, crossing her arms, "this is the family business. Sarah is the president and CEO of Kingston Enterprises. It's worth about $3 billion, a detail she forgot to mention during her romantic adventures." The silence that followed was deafening. Derek looked at Sarah, searching her eyes for denial. He found none. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice coming out lower than he intended. Sarah sighed. "Yes, and there's a lot more you need to know." Veronica smiled triumphantly. "I'll make this simple for you, sweetheart. Sarah here has a habit of testing men by pretending to be poor. You were just another guinea pig in her social experiments. And now that the game is over, it's time for you to go back to your normal life and leave a real family alone." "Veronica, you've crossed the line," Sarah said, her voice taking on a tone Derek had never heard before. Authoritative, dangerous. "I crossed the line?" Veronica laughed. "You're exposing your sons to some stranger just because he was nice to you. Adam must be turning in his grave." That was the last straw. Sarah turned to Michael Hayes, who had remained silent until then. "Michael, can you begin?" Michael opened one of the folders and took out a stack of documents. "Miss Sterling, 3 years ago after your brother's death, you began a systematic campaign to question Sarah's ability as a mother and as the company's administrator." Veronica paled slightly. "I was protecting my family. In fact," Michael continued, "you were trying to obtain custody of the boys and control of the company. We have recordings of her conversations with various lawyers discussing strategies to prove Sarah's mental instability." Michael activated a tape recorder. Veronica's voice echoed through the room. "She's clearly depressed. 2 small children are too much to run. It's only a matter of time before she makes a serious mistake. When that happens, I'll be ready." "That's been taken out of context," Veronica protested. "We also have," Michael continued relentlessly, "emails from you to the press trying to sell information about Sarah's personal life, including photographs taken illegally of the boys at school." Sarah approached Veronica, who was now visibly shaking. "You threatened to expose my relationship with Derek as if it were something shameful. As if a black, intelligent, successful man were unsuitable for my family." "I didn't say that." "We have recordings, Veronica. Your conversations with journalists where you question Derek's suitability for our social class, where you suggest he's only interested in the money." Derek watched in shock. Sarah had systematically documented all of Veronica's attacks, not just to protect herself, but to protect anyone she chose to love. "And now," Sarah continued, "we come to the most interesting part. Michael pulled out another set of documents. "Miss Sterling, we have discovered that you have been illegally accessing company bank accounts using passwords you obtained from Sarah's personal computer. Over the past 2 years, you have embezzled approximately $500,000. Veronica staggered. "That's a lie." "We have the bank records. Transfers to an account in your name. Credit card bills showing expenditures inconsistent with your stated income." Sarah moved closer. "You weren't protecting the family, Veronica. You were stealing from her." Veronica's mask of superiority finally fell. Tears of anger and despair welled up in her eyes. "You can't do this to me. I'm family." "Family doesn't blackmail. Family doesn't steal. And family definitely doesn't try to destroy innocent people's happiness out of pure prejudice." Sarah turned to Derek, who was silently processing everything. "Derek, I know I lied about who I was, and I understand if that changes everything between us, but I want you to know that every moment we've spent together was real, and all of this," she gestured to the documents, "was to protect not only me and the boys, but you as well." Derek looked at Veronica, who was now crying uncontrollably, then at Sarah, and finally at Ben and Leo, who were watching everything without fully understanding, but knowing that Mommy was protecting someone they loved. "You documented everything," Derek said slowly. "Every threat, every attempt at manipulation. I learned that against people like Veronica, you need irrefutable proof." Michael addressed Veronica one last time. "Mrs. Sterling, you have 2 options. Sign these documents agreeing to return the stolen money, accept a permanent restraining order, and quietly leave this family's life. Or we take this to court where everything will become public, including the criminal charges for embezzlement." Veronica signed the documents with trembling hands, her arrogance completely destroyed. When she left the room, she was a broken woman who had lost not only the money, but any chance of maintaining contact with her nephews. As the doors closed behind Veronica, a heavy silence fell over the room. Sarah had just systematically demolished someone who threatened her using nothing but documented truth and her own strategic patience. But the question hanging in the air was more complex than any legal victory. Would it be possible to rebuild trust after so many secrets have been revealed at once? Derek remained silent for several minutes, watching Ben and Leo play on the rug as if nothing had happened. Sarah waited, respecting his process. "You tested me," he finally said, "but you also protected yourself, And more importantly, you protected your sons from people like Veronica. Sarah nodded. I've learned that fortune attracts masks. I wanted to know your true heart. And me? Derek smiled sadly. Did I pass the test? You defended a white stranger at the entrance to a restaurant. You paid our bill without hesitation. You loved my sons before you even knew my full name. Sarah approached him. You didn't pass the test, Derek. You completely redefined what I expected to find. 2 months later, Sarah and Derek were in the same restaurant where they had been discriminated against, but this time they were the owners. Sarah had bought the establishment, completely renovated it, and appointed Derek as the legal director of the new anti-discrimination policy. Mr. Williams, said the former receptionist, now unemployed, begging for a chance. Please, I need the job. Derek looked at Sarah, who just smiled. Everyone deserves a second chance, she said. But here, we treat every customer like family, regardless of their appearance or bank account. Veronica had lost everything: her money, her reputation, and any chance of contact with her nephews. She now lived in a modest apartment, working as a receptionist, learning the hard way what it meant to be judged by appearances. Mommy, said Leo, drawing on the table at the renovated restaurant, is Mr. Derek going to live with us forever? Sarah looked at Derek, who proudly wore the engagement ring she had chosen for him. Forever, Prince. You know, said Derek, watching families of all colors dining happily around them. I've discovered that true wealth isn't what you have, but the character you reveal when no one is looking. Sarah smiled, kissing his forehead. And I've discovered that true love can't be bought, tested, or forced. It just happens when you find someone who loves your essence, not your possessions. Justice had been served. Veronica learned that prejudice and greed come at a high price. Sarah discovered that honesty builds solid foundations. And Derek proved that standing up for what's right is worth more than any fortune. The best revenge against prejudice is not to return hatred. It's to build a world where love conquers discrimination, where character trumps bank accounts, and where families are formed through choice, not obligation.